Okay, welcome. I'm using a microphone because we are streaming in this, and this will be available on the Fields Institute's archive website. There's also some people who are listening to us internationally because this is ArtSci Salon, and is also Laser TO, Laser Toronto. Laser Toronto is part of the Leonardo network, so we are trying to expand our network in art and science to include North America and also to include more international audience. This was thanks to Nina Segledi, who is not with us tonight because she's in Mexico, and hopefully she's listening to us from there. This is also an event that is sponsored by Ontario Arts Council, and it is supported by the Fields Institute, which gave us this fantastic place. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's topic, which is we made an executive decision to call it Data Imaginaries for many reasons. It was our way to put together three people who were doing work that was very diverse, and data and imagination were the two things that very superficially they had in common. But then, besides that, there's something to be said about data per se. The fact that when we are when we are interacting with digital stuff, we are interacting with data. So it's kind of something that is taken for granted. What I also wanted to point out was we talk so much about big data and what big data are doing, et cetera, but we do not really focus on the processes behind that and how data can actually be manipulated in a more creative way, because they are on a daily basis. So we have here who will go first, followed by Christopher Collins. Should I say something about you, or you want to introduce yourself? I'm very informal here, so I'll let you introduce yourself because this is a very informal setting. So, okay, thank you for coming.
Yeah. So is this working? So thank you, Rebecca, for that review.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are Graham Wakefield, Haru, and together we've been working as artists collaboratively since 2007. A little bit higher. This is okay. Okay. We have been collaborating. It's not going to stay there, is it? Should I do this? Maybe I can tie a quick knot. How's that? There we go. As artificial nature, which is going to be a big part of what we talk about. But first of all, I thought to introduce us in a bit more detail.
So background?
Our backgrounds are interestingly interdisciplinary, or hopefully interestingly interdisciplinary. So at the top there is Haru. So do you want to?
So before making this like a team together, that I majored in sculpture, so it's like purely fine arts, and then up to from the middle school, high school, and university and graduate school, all those times I majored in sculpture, and then actually after I graduated graduate school and I finished my MFA, I started to be interested in this computation and a virtual space. So I started to use 3D animation and game engine to make the work. And then it was after, I met him and I joined to UCSB, the Media Arts and Technology graduate program. That time I started to use codings to make the work.
Okay, and below that's me. In the bottom corner, this is indicating my origins in studying philosophy. That's Gilles Deleuze and Henri Bergson, who were a big influence on what I've done since then. Above that is representing my interest in computer music. I did a master's in music composition. You can hear a little bit of the sounds that I made at that time. And besides that is a piece of generative art called Makeshift, which is what I moved on to doing after doing computer music. And Haru didn't mention, she's currently an assistant professor at Sogang University in Korea and a visiting professor at York University. And I'm an assistant professor at York University as well. Okay, so this is where we met.
Yes.
So this is UC Santa Barbara, and we actually met in a graduate program called Media Arts and Technology. So it was specifically an interdisciplinary graduate program, and doing research at a building that was built here just after this photo was taken, and. We're going to talk a little bit about the allosphere because that was that's a space specifically focused on scientific visualization. However, Haru was just mentioning that it's although we lived here for 7 years, I only surfed twice. And
even I wear the swimming suit only twice. I really didn't expect what's the graduate school student life would be the time.
Now we're in Toronto. There's a little bit of regret there. The allosphere is as it says here, a research facility in a spherical theatre-like pavilion. It's basically a 3-story high ball of perforated grey aluminium, which is a projection surface. In a near anechoic cube, it's surrounded by, I think, currently 56 loudspeakers. So essentially, you can have stereoscopic display in any direction that you look and sound emanating from different directions. And it's used to project virtual environments with which you can interact. There's a couple of different, there's fundamental research in the development of virtual reality systems, and then there's a variety of information and scientific visualization that goes on in this place. However, what's notable about it is that it was conceived as an instrument in both the scientific and the musical senses of the term. So it is an instrument in the sense of a microscope for exploring large-scale visualizations of data and simulations of scientific models, but is also conceived as an instrument that can be performed and a site of experimentation in audiovisual composition. So just some images so you can kind of get an idea for the scale of it. This is sort of the mass here of projectors that are required to cover. Currently, I think there are...
360, I think it's...
Yeah. There's currently 16 projectors, I think, covering the surface, all in a big mass. So I did a lot of work there, figuring out how to actually make that work. Here's some images of visualizations in the space. This is a visualization of fMRI brain data, and it's being explored by some artificial agents.
What's interactive too? That people can call the agents. Using the touch sensors, the people can call the agents, and then agents gonna bring some kind of data, the regional data, and then they sing to the people. So it's a little abstract, yeah.
Here's another example of a visualization that both of us ended up working on. This is a visualization of nanoscale drug delivery going through the human vascular system and lymph node system. Which became a kind of fantastic voyage as you're basically tunneling down the intestine here. Yeah. So what we've been showing so far are mostly on the side of the scientific visualization in this space. But what we really got excited about was the possibilities of this as a new medium for art. And that was in part the impetus for starting our project, Artificial Nature. And we've created a number of artificial natures since 2007. I'm just going to read this definition. An artificial nature is a form of installation art synthesizing phenomena of artificial life with the world-making of responsive mixed reality environments. So artificial life, for those who are not familiar, is a science as well as an art form, aiming to understand life by recreating it in other media, usually computational media, but also synthetic biology. In responsive mixed reality environments is encompassing the spectrum of virtual reality environments where the world that you're surrounded with is essentially blocked out and you're surrounded by an entirely simulated reality. So like in the Allosphere or like with a head-mounted display like the Oculus Rift. To situations of augmented reality where images are being superimposed on things in the real world, computer-generated images. So specifically, an artificial nature presents a computational world with its own physics and biology in order to construct nature-like aesthetic experiences of generative creativity with significantly interactive environments. And we're deeply motivated to do this in order to explore the creative potential of a computational environment that draws more from nature's sense of open-ended continuation rather than some rational sense of utilitarian closure. So that in a way, humans and machines can partake in each other's enlivened time. This is a research creation project. It's resulted in a number of installations and also a number of research publications and so forth. And it has resulted in presentations at more than 30 international events. So we're going to talk about three pieces in particular. But first, because the theme today is the data imaginary. We happened to do a presentation just a few weeks ago at IEEE Visualization Conference relating what we're doing specifically to data visualization and comparing its similarities and differences. So I'm just going to run through those quickly. So it turns out in developing these artworks, it's involved many of the same techniques and challenges that are characteristic of interactive visualization in general. But some of the implications are a little bit different, and we'll hopefully work our way through those. So in data visualization, above all else, the goal is to show the data. You're trying to show the data and induce the viewer to think about its substance and the relations between its elements. And that's the same for us. It's just that what we're working with is a simulation. It's a system. I mean, this is also true frequently in data visualization. We're also trying to induce attention towards its substantial qualities and the relations between its elements. We're trying to maximize the amount of information that's being shown that is directly derived from the data or from the system, to avoid distorting what the system has to say, to coherently present many quantities, many features in a small space, and revealing things at multiple levels of detail, from a broad overview to fine structure. We're trying to create a world, and a world that is experienced and understood through the way that it's presented to you. But in some ways, there are some differences. Whereas data visualization is generally aimed to serve reasonably clear analytic purposes, such as data description, tabulation, comparison, and so forth, we're creating a nature, a virtual nature, an artificial nature, in which its continuity, its incompleteness, is more important than its closure. And this is relating to something that's important to many artists, a goal of achieving a form of defamiliarization. So shaking your assumptions, or presenting you with a stimulus that stops the, how could I say, like the rapid cognitive process of categorization, because it doesn't fit into easy categories, and makes you start to experience things a little bit more viscerally, and a little bit more like the way that you did when you were a child, in a sense. And this, for us, is a big motivation. And whereas in data visualization, you would frequently, your goal would be to closely integrate with statistical and verbal descriptions, for us, we can't include that kind of material. Instead, what we're trying to preserve and encourage is the diversity and the metastability of interpretation, that multiple levels of interpretation are simultaneously possible. So we came up with this keyword of endogenous visualization, which simply means that, like data visualization, form and functionality need to go together to provide the insights and communicate the key aspects of the world. But for us, because we're creating a world that is, like any world, self-sufficient, every perceivable element that you see needs to have some dynamic ontological capacity, or at least one capacity in the world, such that it plays active roles in multiple world-level processes and other elements. What does that mean? That means things like textual labels we cannot include in our systems. Textual labels are secondary notations that are specifically designed to help us understand and categorize the materials that we're seeing. We can't do that. The labels themselves don't have a functional role in the world. They're simply for you. We can't have overlays. We can't have anything that, in filmmaking terms, is non-diegetic, right? Nothing from outside. No narrator's voice. Another interesting difference is that because, in contrast to data visualization, where the data usually pre-exists and your task is to make that easier to understand, to make it more accessible, in our case, the system is evolving hand in hand with the design of how it's experienced. Okay, that's the end of the theory. Oh no, one more point. But this one has a picture. So the effectiveness of an interactive experience depends significantly on what we can do within it and what we can experience. But for an artwork, the what and the why can be quite open-ended. So participants are not executing specific analytic tasks. There are no user-driven goals here. The meaning is multi-layered and contextually derived. So we completely agree with what artists Krista Summer and Lauren Mignonneau have said here, that there are no predefined solutions of what to do. And the best way to achieve this is that the visitor to our work becomes part of the system, that or the immersion in the world becomes part of that world, in a functional sense. So you're taking part in the processes that are going on in this space, and those processes are not predefined. So, how do we achieve these things? Well, we started with these basic principles that every perceivable element has to have these roles, not representing nature in the way that it looks, but trying to construct a world in the way that the best understandings that we have of how nature works, hence the use of artificial life. Making sure that everything in the space has got a reason for being there. It's not random. It's got a developmental process. It's got a systematic role. And so that each visitor becomes part of the ecosystem. We worked with immersive technology to envelop multiple senses, devices that would sense your voluntary actions as well as your involuntary actions, your movements, or just your sheer presence in the space. And consequences of those actions that are easy to perceive but difficult to predict. They're not trivial A leads to B. A diversity of interactions to support exploratory discovery, and making sure that the world is sensitive to these actions but not dependent on them. So hopefully these will become apparent as we show. We're going to look at 3 artworks and see how that works. And jump in any time if you want. But before we do, just as the kind of bridge between our work in the allosphere and the installations that we moved on to making afterwards, this is one of our earlier artificial natures called Fluid Space, actually installed in the allosphere. So you can see this is just a slow pan with the camera. It's incredibly difficult to take photos and video in a 360 dark sphere.
Yes,
so hopefully, there's a panoramic image up at the top, stitched together. This is just a slow pan around. Hopefully you can get an idea of the kind of the scale of it through that. Okay, so the first piece we're going to talk about is endless current, which in a way is a continuation of fluid space. And Yeah, there's a. Here's an example installation of endless current. This was this one at Yomiuri Exhibition Hall in Yeosu in Korea in 2014. So this is trying to bring. I mean, it's important to us to bring our work out of specialist labs like the Alice here into a more accessible space. Bringing that kind of scale of work to a gallery as best as we can. This is the same work, but now being experienced on the Oculus Rift, which is a head-mounted display. For those who don't know about this, is a display that you wear on your face and presents stereoscopic images to your eyes. So you're essentially completely, and it's tracking as you turn your head around and move around. So you feel like you are really in this virtual world. You can see on the screen the images that she's seeing. And you can also see that here we've started tracking her body, so she can see her arms in front of her, and she can start to interact with the world around her. And I'm just going to break out of this for a second, because rather than show you that horror video, I can show you it's running in real time here. So this is what the piece looks like. So there's a large world. We can navigate through this world. In the installation, you navigate by leaning your body or moving your arms in different directions. So there's no joysticks or handheld things. You're just there, and as you look at things, they start to approach you. It's a very large world. It is not concerned. Okay, I'll just hold still for a second. Leave my mouse out of the way. So you can see that there's a terrain in the space, and then within that space there's a number of these particles and other things. The particles are being moved around by a fluid simulation. So this is a real-time fluid simulation. It's an approximation of the fluid is moving around. It's moving the elements that are in there. It's also wearing down. It's eroding the landscape. So very gradually you'll see the landscape changing its shape. The landscape at the same time is constraining the fluid flow. So it's creating areas where it's more or less turbulent. And this effectively changes the adaptive conditions of the creatures that live. There's different kinds of creatures. There's these fly-like creatures here, and then there's these more seaweed or plankton or something in the space. And they consume different colors of particles. They digest them. Actually, if I can, it's a little hard to navigate from here, but where's my mouse? If I can get. Yeah, this is running right now. Oh, here we go. So I'll try and get a closer creature so that you can, because I can pause it. Let's get to one of these. Yeah, you can see inside here, he's digesting this particle here. And if you watch, I'm going to start it again. If you watch, you'll see the particle kind of move through his body as it's being digested and then getting ejected. And I'll try and do the same for the others. Get close to this guy. Yeah, you can see inside. He's got a few particles inside that he's digesting, and we'll see. If he dies, you'll see that they get ejected. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry? We'll try and answer that at the end, if that's okay. That is a very good question, actually. Yeah, I want to answer it at the end. Okay. Anyway, so that's our demo. So the second piece that we wanted to show is a piece called Time of Doubles. And this represented an important step for us in that we've been making these kind of increasingly immersive worlds where you're surrounded by the visuals and the sounds, like in the atmosphere. But there's kind of a side effect from that. I mean, the feeling of engagement is strong from the sense of the immersion that you get. But at the same time, the engagement is a little bit disconnected. I mean, effectively, by cutting off the outside world, you're also cutting off your body. You're cutting off your presence within the world. So we wanted to bring the body back. And so we made a piece called Time of Doubles, where the principal function in this space is, well, first of all, you can see that we're not surrounding you with projections anymore. Instead, now the display is this large sculptural object that's it's confronting you in the space. And as you walk into the space, you find a double that appears in the world that exactly mirrors your body shape and follows your movements. It plays very, very different roles. And so this is some of the some documentation of why we were developing this work, an experiment with different ideas. Haru's moving around in the space here. You can see her double here in particles, and this double is being consumed by the creatures that live in the space. So, because she is the source of energy, but at the same time, when she moves, she's also creating turbulence in the fluid. So her body is dissipated and then recollects, and it also blows the creatures around. So she's the sun and she's the wind, or anybody who walks into space is the sun and the wind.
And also, I want to add just one point that there was a reason, the artistic reason, to decide to be eaten by alien species too, because the biggest critic about our fluid space and infinite game, like our previous works, was that your works were too beautiful. That was the biggest criticism from the art professionals. So we were thinking about it, because what does it mean? It's too beautiful, or everything is too beautiful? Because our world, our ecosystem was always abundant, or it was full of lives, and they die, and they are born again, but it's always kind of a certain level of abundances. So, and then there was kind of when you interact, you can navigate freely to the 6th degree, everywhere. But still, in terms of the agencies, what you can do was too limited. So I want to bring in some tension in it. So that your virtual double have the role as a part of the system, and then that role is giving your body as you kind of make the energy, and then you are eaten by alien species. So there was a kind of artistic reason to bring.
Yeah. So it's I'm going to play a video of the first exhibition of this work, which is at the Seoul Olympic Museum of Art in Korea. I think we can probably just let it go.
I think the beginning is when you come up to
This is the world without people. And as somebody enters the space. It's actually related to the tension question. It is important that the life forms that we create, they look something like creatures that we know, but they're not exactly any particular thing. They look a bit like piranhas, they look a bit like beetles. They're between forms. sound before. So, we mentioned, that's weird.
There was a blending. I don't know what's going on.
We mentioned before the importance for us that all elements are interacting with every other, and there are multiple capacities between each of the elements. So this is a diagram of the different interactions in time doubles. You want to say anything about it?
There is no dead end. So it's always like linked. So it's kind of everything is linked to each other. So to show the system, we really aim to show the relations and connections in between, not only the components.
And we presented it in this this unusual double-sided curved projection screen, and this is partly to kind of play further with the idea of your double in the space. You can have a double on your side. You're also a double on the other side for the other people. It's also I don't know, maybe you'll be better to talk about this, but the importance of making the world a sculptural object in the space around you. And interestingly, one thing that we found and has been corroborated many times as we've shown the work is that this actually seems to increase the engagement with the piece. We did try and bring this piece to the allosphere and show it in there. And although it's amazing to see the creatures moving around you, and it's a much higher resolution, so you can see a lot more detail, the engagement is weaker than it is in a gallery setting.
Because now people are so so familiar into the projection. So at the beginning, when we make this like a 3D virtual world in Word, then we thought that this projection is like invitation. It's a door, it's a window, or it's a door to let the participants come in too. But whenever like we project, whatever like we have like 3 like surrounded wall or 4 surrounded wall, but whenever we project it, the people never forget that this is a projection. The word, even though it's like a full 3D. So that's why we brought this architectural or sculptural like object, and this object was very thin, but it's a rear and front projection. And then actually the really, as a sculptor, it was really fun to define the virtual space inside. So how big it is, and then how they align together. So it would be like similar to the physical space, but it would be now like I have a freedom to define it differently. So that's why we kind of have this kind of aligned 2 words, but it's like so the time of doubles that you come up here, then you see that you are the background person at there. So once you walk to this direction, there's another you coming this way. So there's like adjacent or like converted. The spaces. The spaces are similar. It's like you can assume from your experience from physical space, but it's like something very different. And it was really fun to define.
I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about the sonification in this case. So in time doubles, each agent, mostly, I think this is interesting because we took this as a direct inspiration from nature, but in the same way as with the visual presentation, it's using some of the mechanisms of nature, but it's not trying to simulate a particular organism, or it's not trying to be accurate to any particular thing. But still, it's inspired by these natural chirps of maybe crickets or frogs or something like that. The reason for doing this is that little short chirps with asymmetric windows, they're very, very easily, it's very easy to determine their direction. We find it easy to localize these sounds. they also, they're easily separated spectrally in terms of their frequency. So it becomes quite possible to hear both the individual points of sound and also the overall kind of the macro scale cloud shapes of these sounds at the same time. So it's, it's a method that I think can have implications in data visualization as well. Here's just some more photos. Yeah. So this piece is actually showing right now at the Center for Art and Media, the ZKM in Germany. So this is the last piece that we're going to talk about. This piece called Archipelago. And this goes back to one of our earliest experiments when we were just starting to work together, and we were thinking about how we could build ecosystems of agents and environments. And we started off with simple flat planes, visualizing the energy as color. And then it was important to have different areas in the space, have different areas of replenishment of color. So then we thought, well, why not have those be mountain peaks, extruding it into 3D? And then once you've got mountain peaks, you have gradients. So we thought, okay, let's use the gradients to diffuse the chemicals in the space. And this started to create some really interesting dynamics as the creatures evolved and tried to dominate different areas. So then, naturally we thought, let's move this into a real physical landscape in space. So we built this thing with 3 tons of sand, 6 tons of sand.
3 tons.
3 tons?
Yes.
And projections hanging from above and sensors from above tracking your movement. So you can see the projection is following my movement in that little video. And this was the result. I'll just let this play for a little bit. So in this world, in this artificial nature, there are a lot more species, different species. There are 5 or 6 species. There's a fungus that covers the entire surface. You can see this fungus growing now. It's a model with a cellular automata. There are a number of there are some insects that are kind of have social organization. There are some predators. There are scavengers. There are organisms that leave trails and follow each other, moving through the space. And because we're tracking your position through the space, we're able to tell if you happen to walk under the projection and if you're right there where it's going to be. So it's going to, 3 tons. So the Kinects know where you are. They can track your position. They know if you're going to be blocking the light of the projection. And so we project black at that point in space so that you don't end up having the projection on your body. But by doing that, we thought, well, we should give this an ontological role in the world as well, since the shadow exists. So shadow, if you wave your hand over the space, your shadow kills the life that's underneath. It destroys the fungus, and then it regrows again afterwards. You simultaneously kill and refertilize the space. And you can push the organisms around a little bit that way. And this was great, but what we found is that people were really touching quite a lot, and in this case the sand was just regular builder sand, so it hardened and wasn't really malleable. But for our next exhibit of this piece, we switched to using a kind of sand called kinetic sand, which never dries out, so you constantly remold it.
So between sand and clay.
Something between sand and clay, yeah. So we started designing another kind of archipelago, and doing some more experiments, tracking how we can follow people. And
this is a small prototype.
A miniature version. And then here's the final result. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. So this was exhibited in La Gaieté Lyrique in Paris last year. It's quite remarkable how well sand takes projection. when you walk into the space, it really looks like the light is emanating from this sculptural object in front of you. Just going to skip ahead.
Yes.
Yes, this was important.
It's not only like you are allowed to shape it, also you can move pieces from like one land to the other.
Yeah, so.
But we have like the same opinion with the curator too, that we don't explain anything about it, so that like people discover how it works.
So this boy has figured out that he can put his hands down, like creatures walk onto him and lift them up. There was an amazing moment while I was filming this that a guy walked in, he may be 30 something. He walked in and he was just looking at the piece and playing around. And then he tried it just kind of intuitively. He was like, yeah, try it. And then obviously not expecting it to work. And then when it did work, his face, it's just unbelievable kind of transformation. So because we're tracking your position, we can differentiate between you and the landscape. We can follow the optical flow, the movements. We can have the projection follow your body. Yes, yeah. If you change the shape of the landscape, it changes the way that the fungus can recover, and different organisms have different preferences of where they like to live or where they can subsist well. So.
Actually, right now the pieces can randomly fall. So if you kind of build like when there's nothing, and then you kind of throw to like the sands and make the pyrox island, new islands, then there's only fungus is growing, and sometimes the fish are coming out, and then you can capture the top there. Then he's like starving, and then when he got starving, he got like whitened out, and then he became so hungry, and then he got more fast and aggressive, and it's really strange that we made this, but I felt like so sorry to that, and then like I need to move back, or like I kind of capture his prey, so like fishes, and I moved to the island.
Yeah, so we had some exhibitions and some awards for that, but I think we've used up all the time, so yeah, thank you.
This is really abrupt.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we should say like the future tangent. Okay.
Well.
Yeah. Switch first and then like.
Yeah.
We don't have time for discussion. Usually what we do is we have discussion after to tie together the two presentations. So hold on to your question.
Yeah. Sorry.
So funny. I think we
Oh, sure. We'll probably run over time.
So I will turn off this one and
I have one.
I don't know.
I didn't bring my HDMI adapters. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's working.
Yeah, it should be.
Just magically works. Let me just move demos.
60.
Oh, wait.
Unable to connect to the internet. Oh no. I was connected earlier, so let's just try.
Okay. So it's just now they like this.
Okay, I think it's good.
You can register yourself actually.
I think it's okay. I just got through EduRoam.
Oh, EduRoam.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can.
I tested it while I was sitting, so it was working. Okay, well, let's see. We can start, and if it works, it works.
One of the sheets that you get into the Wi-Fi.
Okay. But it says I'm connected, so.
Oh, you're connected. Okay,
Yeah.
so it might take a little.
I'm just
bit.
trying
Yeah.
to.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Okay, so in case you don't, I'll okay. Okay, so we're starting with the next one, and our next speaker is, did you say Chris or Christopher?
Chris is fine.
Chris Collins.
Thanks.
Should I say something about you?
I can go ahead. It's fine.
You
Yes,
will
thank
do
you.
it. I have the whole list. It's just that I find them very, boring.
I'll try and be fun and exciting then instead.
So, wow, I wish I had said yes, I'll go first, even though I ran in the room at the last minute, because that was quite something. But anyways, aside from that, it's very intimidating. So thank you, Roberta and Stephen, for inviting me. Stephen, right? Yeah, so I wanted to take this in a different direction, mostly just because that's what I can do, because I'm not an artist. I'm actually a computer scientist and assistant professor at Canada Research Chair in Linguistic Information Visualization at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. And if you haven't heard of us, we're out in Oshawa, sort of new campus. The university is about 12 years old now. And my research focus is in a bunch of different areas. So I work in bringing forward visualizations that allow people to explore language information. So what I'm going to talk about today that has some parallels to the idea of artificial nature is that I'm taking the traces that we leave in our real nature and turning them into data visualizations. So it's sort of the converse in some way. In the research that I do, I work in visualization study, interaction design. We do some stuff with natural user interfaces, so gestural interfaces, connect kind of stuff. This same kind of technology that Haru and Mary are using. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of the applied visualizations we do with real data. I wanted to start off with some quotes that I just like to use as an icebreaker. One of the things that I hear a lot and I write a lot, actually, speaking aesthetically, in the grants that I write, is that information overload is such a big deal and we have to deal with all this information, and what are we going to do? This is a typical quote. So with the amount of information online, it's very easy for people to drown in useless information that they do not need in their daily lives or their business lives. If they try to absorb all this information, you can find yourself experiencing social media overload. But of course, information overload is not a new concept, as much as we try and say it to get additional grant funding. So, sorry, I don't know why this icons are down here. So, of course, Marshall McLuhan, one of the effects of living with electric information is that we live habitually in the state of information overload. There's always more than we can cope with. But I like the older ones even better. So if we go back 1755, as long as the centuries continue to unfold, the number of books will grow continually, and we can predict that a time will come when it will be almost as difficult to learn anything from books as from the direct study of the whole universe. It will be almost as convenient to search for some bit of truth concealed in nature as it will be to find it hidden away in an immense multitude of bound volumes. So information overload is not new. We go back even further. We have reason to fear that the multitude of books which grows every day in a prodigious fashion will make the following centuries fall into a state as barbarous as the centuries that followed the fall of the Roman Empire. So this sort of fear about what are we going to do with all this information is not new. It continues to be a problem, but I would say that
there have been solutions all the way along the way, too. So the invention of the index. Utility of lexica comes not from reading it from beginning to end, which would be more tedious than useful, but from consulting it from time to time. Now, of course, here lexica is a specific type of text, but what I'm trying to get at here is that there have been people trying to develop solutions to how do we organize and manage information for a long time. The greatest secret is to make different marks for different types of passages. Crosses, circles, half circles, numbers, letters, and other characters, which had the various meanings that one assigned to them. So this is about personal annotation practices, and this is one of the things that I'm bringing into my own work. We're doing some projects right now. Unfortunately, they didn't really fit into today's theme, but on how people annotate poetry and tools for helping people work with poetry. So, this is personal marks. So the real problem is not and never has been the wealth of information. The problem is the lack of appropriate tools for filtering, exploration, annotation, and collaboration. The pace of information dissemination exceeds the pace of tool and technique development, and we're always trying to keep up. And this is just me. So there's been some beautiful examples of this over the years, right? So this is a biblical visualization. Charles Larkin, I think, made many of these visualizations of different stories from the Bible. Very beautiful, very evocative. This is not the type of stuff that I'm able to do. This is hand-created. What we're doing is really statistically based. So the area I work in is called visual text analytics. So visualizations or visual techniques for words and documents and sets of documents across a whole wide variety of application areas. So legal studies, market analysis, digital humanities is an area I definitely enjoy working in, literary studies. Also a growing area of personal reflection. So the things that we leave behind, the Fitbit kind of thing, but also our own journals, our own emails, Twitter feeds, those kind of things. How do we explore and play with those pieces of information? So lots of different projects from lots of different people, just showing that there's a lot of variety of work in this area. And I'm going to tell you about a few of the things that we've been doing in my lab. I want to throw out a caution, though. This is you've probably seen this kind of diagram, Wordle diagram, right? Anybody know what this book is, or any guesses? What's your first impression now that you've seen it? The whole thing with Wordles is supposed to be first impression. What did you notice? What was the big words? Sleep. Yeah, bears and sleeping. Yeah. It's not Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's a famous passage from Shakespeare, right? Yeah. You have to. If you're careful looking, then you'll see this. You'll see the solution. But what I want to get at is that I'm not saying that this kind of work that we're doing is replacing reading, right? These are tools for helping people explore and find things of interest that will maybe be evocative of creating further questions. But it can also be misleading because we're removing information. So one of the most enjoyable projects that I've had the pleasure to work with a colleague of mine, Julie Thorpe, and a graduate student, Raphael Veresh, over the last couple of years, has been an investigation of what we call the secret language of passwords. So we have a collection. We've collected. You've probably seen lots of releases in the news about certain websites that get cracked, and there's lots of passwords that are released. Every time one of those happens, we rush out and try and download that information as fast as possible. We've talked to the REB about secondary use of data. We're not cracking the passwords ourselves, so we're okay. But we're finding really interesting things, right? The fact that people write their password every single day, multiple times a day, really means something to the individual, right? You choose that password probably very carefully, and it's not just a string of numbers and letters that are generated at random for most people. So we find things like this. I don't know what to say about this other than it's obviously very sad, but it's something that's really interesting from a sociolinguistic point of view, I think. Yeah, really frustrating. There's also maybe, aspirational passwords as well. So, we came at this project from the point of view of the security implications of trying to find patterns in passwords, right? If we can find patterns in passwords that people use commonly, then we can create a guessing algorithm that will crack passwords better, and then we should make that available so that people can create security. So if we can do it, other people can do it, so we need to make that information available. So it was always a security project, and it turned around into a very interesting investigation of the cultural implications that come out of the passwords, right? The fact that these are secret things that we keep to ourselves, but now we're exposing them, and breaking them down into their individual components. So what we did was extracted the words from 32 million passwords. And then we categorized them based on the type of word that it was. So here are things like, is it a trait, a travel word, a force? Is it candy, musician, number, murderer, whatever? Lots of different what we call semantic categories based on a well-used ontology of words called WordNet. And then we turned it around and created a password guessing system based on the model. But what I want to talk about today are the types of things that we found in the data about the people who are using this website. So first of all, we wanted to compare it to regular English language. So one of our questions was, what's the language of passwords as compared to the language that we use every day? So we created this visualization that allows us to explore these differences. So this is the top 500 words that have the biggest differences between regular English and the passwords corpus. And word number 1 is I. So people talk about themselves, I, more often in passwords than in regular English. But word number 2 was really surprising. It was love. So the second most common word in, not the second most common word in passwords, but the second most common word with a difference from regular English was love. And we saw this happening throughout the data set. So this is the sort of interactive version of this. And we can explore and search the different words. So baby was another one that was really highly occurring in passwords. Me and baby. So the higher it is on this second axis here, is the more it occurs. And then the other axes are just different measures about the words from different data sets. So really sort of personal, cutesy things were really occurring highly. So you can explore this. This is available on my website to look through it yourself.
And what kind of site is these passwords?
So this, okay, that's a good question. So the site that we're using that are behind these passwords in particular is from a website called RockU, which was a gaming website linked to Facebook. It's closed down since. We have passwords from a lot of different websites, but that's the RockU password set is the one that's behind this. One of the interesting things about RockU is that it didn't have a password policy, so some of the passwords are really quite short. Like it wasn't required to have a certain length and a certain special characters and all that stuff. But some of the other, so one of the things we're working on right now is comparing different websites. So for example, unfortunate as it is, we have the Ashley Madison data set, right? So how does that compare in terms of the language that people used in their passwords to the language that people used in the gaming website? We created a password guesser, which was considered to be one of the best, or on a whole bunch of measures, one of the best for guessing passwords. But what we found was really interesting was place names were very popular, male names were very popular. We reflected on this a little bit, maybe the bias in the user group for the website. We don't know because we don't have any of the user information, the demographics. But what I found really fun was the fact that when we looked at the animal words, in another visualization that I'll tell you about in a minute, that was created from my lab about how to analyze like texts of like novels. We just threw the passwords into this, and we saw this. So these are all the most common animal words in the passwords, ranked by the color is the frequency, the darkness of the gray. So we saw in here like a lot of really sort of cutesy animals, right? Puppy, dolphin. There's some miscategorizations. Jay is probably somebody's name. Monkey, elephant. Butterfly was very common, almost up there with fish and ass. And ass was probably not an animal word either. So the other thing we found was that when we looked at the patterns of word usage, words like love are very common, but then there was a disparity between the male names and the female names with the love passwords. So love was 4 times more commonly associated with male names than female names in passwords. Female names were more associated with profanity, and profanity was more common than we ever expected to see. So one of the things we were able to show here was that there's it was expected, but there's a really big bias showing that the types of experiments that people used to do with passwords really were not ecologically valid. So bringing somebody into the lab and saying, please write a password, and don't worry, it won't be associated with your name, and it's secret, and we won't look at it and associate it with you. They still didn't use the types of profanity that they use in real life. Right? The other thing that we saw, which was interesting, so we were able to like break it down into the types of words. So these are all the person-related words. And the ones that came out the most you might see here are dullard, nutcase, and Hawaiian. Nutcase here is actually a synonym for crazy. So crazy is the word that was the most common. Dullard contains idiot and stupid, which was the second most common. And then Hawaiian, for some reason, is popping out. I double-checked this. Hawaiian, Dominican, Mexican. These are like actual words that people put in their password. I thought it was really interesting. But Hawaii is such a small place. I was wondering if there's some nuance about, like, some of these have something to do, like we've seen sports teams' names or movies that came out at the time that this data was captured, those kind of things. So it might be something related to that. Might be a flavor of pizza. Might be something to do with the games. So we've had some really interesting uptake for this work, which is really exciting. We participated with the New York Times in an article related to this research, so you can read it there if you just look it up. So the other thing we did was look at the numbers. So what are the patterns that people are doing with the numbers in their passwords? So this is, again, a visualization. You can go to my website and play with it, of the numbers that people use in their passwords. So across the top is a calendar of the year, and the darker blue of the square is the more common that date occurs in passwords. Of course, we don't know that it's necessarily a date. We just know that it's a number pattern that matches that date in the calendar. Maybe it was just random numbers. But the decades so this helped us see that, people are probably using their birthdays. Right? We expected that, but given the age of the people using this website, 1990s is the most common decade showing up. It's probably their birthdays. A lot of repeated patterns, which are just lazy people writing 0101, 0123. But when we drill down into this is interactive, and look at things like just the year 2001, we see, again, the pattern of 0101 showing up, which is really strong. But then if we look at the passwords that were from 9/11, we see things like NY 9/11, FDNY 9/11, 9/11 Twin Towers. So, and then some weird ones. So it was just a fun project. We came at it from a computer science point of view, but right away we were really excited and interested about delving into this data from a just curiosity point of view. What are people thinking when they make these passwords, and just thinking about the mindset of people when they wrote their passwords. So yeah, we're continuing along these lines, and you can play with all these visualizations on the website. So a few other things that I've been working with. So this one is an older project, which we repurposed for this passwords work, where we look at organizing the language based on the meaning of the words. So there's some, shadowing from the projector, but so what we do in this project is we're looking at taking words out of a book and counting them, but also structuring them based on what they are. So game is a type of activity, chair is a type of furniture, table is also a type of furniture, and putting them into this visualization structure. So what comes out of this then is a structure that allows us to see what are the most common animals or birds or fish in the texts based on, or any kind of category. We've just put animal in the middle here. So we can actually drill down to see the actual text. Here on the side are the paragraphs of the text where the word that was selected, animal, occurs in the text. And you can actually look at the text itself. So it's sort of a zoomed out view of the structure of the text, almost like a Wordle diagram, but now the words are organized based on their meaning in their semantic categories. And again, this one's available online and you can play with it. We've updated it to include pulling out the proper nouns in the text and associating them together with the other nouns. Okay, so just zooming through a bunch of different projects. Here is another one. So I'm going to read you a bit of a passage. So, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more." Distinctly I remember it. It was bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow for the loss of Lenore. So, which of these bars represents that text?
One.
The last one, right? The last one. So the first one is the vision and values of Coca-Cola. The second one is The Tale of Two Cities, and the bottom one is The Raven, which I just read an excerpt from, Edgar Allan Poe. So this is a current ongoing project that I'm really excited about, where we're looking at the relationship between words and colors as evoked by people in our minds. The data set that we're using comes from a collaborator of ours at the National Research Council in Ottawa, where they did a crowdsourcing study of several thousand participants, where they gave them a word and a definition and asked them to choose the color that associates with that word. So here is a picture of the visualization, where we're taking the crowdsourced data and turning it around now and looking at what are revealing what the associations are with those words. So we create this chromatic fingerprint of a text. Here are some of the words that had multiple meanings. So there are two senses of remember, and only one of them had a stronger association. The other one didn't have any agreement. So this is called Lexichrome, and you can play with it online. Maybe I'll bring it up, actually. So let's see here. Palette view. So there's a bunch of different sort of movements in this visualization that allow you to explore the language of sort of the color relationships of language. So of course we see obvious color relationships like water is blue and those kind of things, but we're able to explore some of the more obscure relationships that you may not expect that came out of this really large survey of people answering questions about this data. Sorry, it's a bit slow loading. I might have to go back to my slides. Yeah, I think our web is a bit slow. Okay. We'll see if we have time. We can play with it after, or you can play with it later. So I have backup slides, so don't worry. So the first sort of movement in this visualization allows you to explore the amount of agreement that people had about a particular word. Interestingly, the yellow word that people agreed on the most was cowardly, not sunshine. Some people said sunshine was orange or red. Cowardly is always yellow. So the other thing we've been playing around with, again, how do we structure this into different kinds of ways to explore it? So you can scroll all these bars, and of course the bar here, the length of the yellow is the amount of agreement that people had about the word. This one is one that we're playing with right now. It's a view of the language, again, based on its meaning. So if we go up here, we'll see, this is actually, we're working with this. The review comments that we got was, where are the labels? Which, of course, is what I expected. There are hover labels that you can see, but there's no... And it's funny because you guys are saying, oh, well, let's take away the labels. It's like a tension, I think, between the two different types of practice that we have. For me, labels being gone was a major problem. Even though I think I want this printed as a poster for my office without the labels, personally. But I know what the data is. So, of course, up here we have words related to water and the ocean. So these are categorized semantically again. This, though, is really interesting. I wish we could... Let's see if it's loaded. Okay, so we've got blue. Let's see. Yeah, I'll load that and see if we can play with it once it loads. These words up here are not plants and grass and things. It's actually words related to wealth and ownership. People really agreed that jealousy, wealth, ownership, money, these are all green words. Of course, they're not green words internationally, but the participants in our study had some agreement that these words were green. Love, passion, those kind of words are down here in the red area. So we've been playing around. The PhD student, Chris Kim, who's working on this, his dissertation research is around visualization of cultural artifacts. So we've got a project going forward now with DeviantArt, the user-generated art platform, to help look at sort of analytics of the types of things that people contribute to DeviantArt. And we're looking at movie data from IMDb and a bunch of other things like that. So this is the first project for him in looking at the color data. So here we go. So you can explore this and see the topics and also the amount of agreement. So there wasn't a huge amount of agreement overall about these. And then you can zoom in. So let's see what's down here. Words relating to space. And you can zoom in on that and see the subcategories, dimensions. What's over here? navigation is blue, highly blue. So words related to navigation. So there'll be even another level below here, which shows you the actual words that are related to navigation. And they have a variety of different colors, but many of them are blue in their association. So we've been, the other one I wanted to show you was one this is like brand new, like a couple of days ago. We're working on, one of my visions for like, what's this for kind of thing, is the ability for people to use this as they write. So if some brand manager wants to write something and evoke redness in the minds of the readers because they're writing the Coca-Cola ad copy, or some friends of mine who are poets who might want to write and like have a whole paragraph that's just blue, even though it's really subtle and you don't really get it, but maybe in your head it sort of evokes this feeling of blueness. So we're playing around with that. So here, as you type, you get colors, like, what's purple? I don't know, violets. These colors are pulled directly from the database. We're working now on like, what if I want to replace violet with a color that's going to be blue instead? Can you show me synonyms of violet that might have a blue tone to them? So that's sort of late-breaking work. We were talking about it today. This is an undergrad project. I'm just showing it just to give you a little bit of another theme about the types of stuff that we're working on. This is really rough, but we're looking at how can we take texts and turn them into maps of the movements of the people or characters in the text. So we're calling it sort of like a geomapper, where you can trace the movement of characters through things like, around the world in 80 days. Is it 80? Or other kinds of like epic books where people travel to real places. Of course, one of the challenges that we have with these texts is that there's a lot of figurative mentions or quotation mentions. So with a lot of linguistic processing, we're trying to pick out the actual places that the people visited versus the things that they mentioned or figuratively mentioned. Another theme, I'll just finish up quick, that we're working on are things like sentiment analysis, so picking out the feelings that people have, the emotions that people have in their texts. There's a lot of applications of this, not just about selling things, but also about things like state of mind analysis, forensic linguistics, looking at what kind of state of mind was that person in when they committed suicide, those kind of things, emotional profiling. Another undergraduate project that we did last year was looking at examining tweets in context and being able to filter them based on the time and emotions. So here, just a very simple visualization, but we've rated all the tweets based on emotional content with very simple linguistic analysis to rate them as positive or negative, but also be able to filter them based on other kinds of emotion words. So things like surprise or anger. I don't think I opened this one. So we can just type in any Twitter handle and it'll bring up the data. So this is actually, this one was a forensic case. We were looking at the final tweets of somebody who was involved with school shooting. So, of course, it's an interesting tension between privacy and investigation, because really this is public data, right? You're putting your tweets out there. But if we're looking at scenarios where your therapist is watching your Twitter feed and getting signal information about your emotional state from that, is that a privacy violation even though it's public data? So it's a really interesting thing to think about, and we haven't really thought about what are the appropriate interventions if things start showing up in this visualization. But I think it is something that's important to consider. And that one's not loading either, so we'll keep going. So one of the things that I'm interested in as well, even though I'm a computer scientist, is trying to challenge some of the thoughts we have in my own community around how visualization influences reasoning, how do visualization design decisions bias people's potential understanding of the data. One of the things that I was actually speaking with Graham and Roberta on a Skype call this week, and I said, I think we had some resonance around this. One of the things that I don't like very much is when people say, oh, we're unbiased scientists and we're just presenting the information as it is. And of course, maybe of course not the right word, but I don't think that's true. I think that the design decisions that we make around whether or not, for example, different kinds of ways that people can interact with the data. The exact question you asked about where did the data come from, the passwords, right? What type of website? Without disclosing that information, it's very hard for you to interpret what is going on here. So we wrote a paper about some of the theoretical discussion around one for critical information visualization. So types of ways that we can evaluate a visualization based on how people can interact or use it. So disclosure, is it revealing its sources? Is it talking about the intentions or decisions that were made behind the visualization? So what was the point of it? Does it offer plurality of various perspectives? Can you put in your own, can you see yourself in the visualization? Can you focus on the data that relates to you and your neighborhood? Contingency, so can you look at the data from different ways, maybe with a different type of vision? So is it a pie chart, is it a bar chart? Can you choose between them? And then empowerment, here, both empowerment to maybe bring your own data into the visualization, but also to maybe modify the visualization, download it, open source, change it, remix it, put it back online and try it in a different way. So we did, in our paper, we analyzed a bunch of different visualizations based on these 4 principles. And this is one of the examples, is Oakland crime spotting. So in terms of disclosure here, it's accompanying articles and the motivation behind the design were really publicly available. They were linked from the homepage. The plurality, so the data is organized by location and date and time and the type of the crime, but there's no exploration allowed around the reasons behind the crime or the circumstances of the crime or the details of the story. So there's pieces of information that have been removed or are missing. It's regularly updated, and it has ability for empowerment through the addition of comments and links. So each of these crimes that you see, you can actually write comments and participate in sort of a culture around using this visualization. Of course, some of the design decisions or something else that's not in our paper, but I'm interested in. The use of red, the use of green, the feelings that come up with those colors. So I think one of the other things that I want to bring up here is, this is another visualization from my lab, but that thinking about aesthetics is important. And I think people want to engage with beautiful visualizations. I was really moved by looking at your work. And it's challenging because I have a computer science degree, right? Like, I'm not a designer, I'm not an artist, but I have an appreciation for that kind of stuff. And I feel, as a usability expert, somebody who works in human-computer interaction, I have seen that people want to work with stuff that's beautiful. They don't want to work with ugly software and bad visualization designs. But it's really hard because we have these silos in our communities where people don't have that professional experience. I was lucky enough to work with my PhD supervisor, Sheila Carpendale, who has a background in art. She worked at Harborfront Center as a ceramics artist. So I had some exposure to that kind of thinking. The other thing is, like, colors carry meaning. Relating, back to lexichrome, the colors we choose can affect the mood, and you can use those in ways to bias as well. So another theme that sort of came up here was the idea that unanticipated uses of the visualization are really fun and interesting. So this visualization, which I made for looking at language translation, here English to Chinese, in my sort of linguistic interests, was reused by bioinformatics researchers to look at relationships between different kinds of chemical structures using the same sort of code from the visualization technique. The docuverse visualization for looking at the structure of language in a text was reused for teaching English. Here are all the different meanings of the word bank. So I think some of the connection here is like bringing forward what's excluded from the sort of mainstream visualization, the popular visualizations that we see in the media. So taking what the kind of traces that we leave in society, our tweets and our passwords and those kind of things, and trying to turn those around to support reflection and exploration about the nature of individuality, the nature of our culture and communities. As I said, some of the challenges, so from my community, the assumption of being free of bias, not having the proper training in terms of visual design, yeah, so that's sort of my rant. So just thanks to a bunch of people, most importantly, a bunch of students that I work with on a daily basis, which is what makes my job so much fun. Okay, thanks.
We need hours
of discussion here. Should I start? Yeah, everybody to the stage, and I think that Mike has a pressing question.
I'm curious about tool sets. Like, I'd like to contrast and compare
Yeah.
tool sets that you use.
Me too. Do you want to speak? I'm curious about how you guys made all that stuff. So you want to talk first about it?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. We started most of our works. We sketch prototypes, just simple subsets of the system. So just working on the shape of organisms, or just working on the interactions between different kinds of dynamic fields, things like that. We sketch them using different kinds of coding environments that are easy to use and easy to prototype ideas in. So we've used things like Maximus P, which is a programming environment widely used by composers and visual artists. We've used things like processing, things like Maya, things like Lua scripting, different things like that. And then once we've got some things that are feeling solid, then we translate those into C++ and OpenGL so that we can get the best performance out of the hardware that's possible. It's really important. It's really essential in order to get a large world in which everything is moving. Efficiency becomes a concern.
That's hard.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's simulated on a 32 by 32 by 32 voxel grid, so it's not actually that high resolution, but it looks a lot richer.
Who is actually doing that work? Like, is that you and you are programming in C++ doing all this stuff?
Yeah.
Or is it?
He did.
Yeah.
And then, I started the
Coding after my 30s. Experience, so but I can do only some parts, so not like frameworks, but he's working at all like frameworks, and I'm working on just I'm focused whatever I wanted to make, and then how the system he does.
I'm just asking because I'm very humbled by it, because I teach computer graphics, but something like this would take me forever to come up with like you were saying, the performance of it and things like that. So, I use processing as well in my work. Most of what we're doing these days, we've moved away from custom software because we want to launch almost everything we do on the web. Right. So we've moved to SVG, HTML5. D3 is a big one that we use a lot. But certainly processing OpenGL as well in the past. But it's amazing, to see the skill set, from your training. Anyway, enough praise.
Yeah.
Slide before Sonification, I don't know if people remember it, but do remember it, was highly symmetric, and then most of your motions were fluid and smooth. If you tried asymmetry and jitter.
Jitter motions.
Remember the slide?
Yeah, the one before Sonification. I don't know if this is the same question, but we sometimes get asked about randomness, and we do use randomness in our worlds, but we try to make sure that when we do use randomness, which includes some amount of jitter, actually the particles in endless current have got a certain amount of jitter, but we make sure that the randomness is limited in its effect. So it's low scale randomness that can seed an effect that happens, but anything that happens over a larger scale is the result of. Yeah, there's Brownian in there definitely, but yeah, just it's okay. This one, the
schematic of the setup.
Yeah, the schematic of the timer doubles installation. Here, I can plug it in for everyone. Do you want to talk about that symmetry?
Yeah, that works pretty well.
You look at these two, the upper ones, let alone the rightmost down.
Yeah, it's a reflection symmetry. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, with a twist. So there's something figurative in that as well. So we've talked about this idea of showing continuation in our piece. So without that reflection, it's just a direct mirror, right? You're standing there and your double is there, and it's one to one. You know, it doesn't go any further. But by having this extra double that mirrors it one more, it's like 1 + 1 implies 1 + 1 + 1. You know, it implies a further continuation. So that's not the whole story, but that's one element of it.
Main point here, so this is
yeah, it's rotated and reflected.
That's related to the compression. So the screen is a 3 to 4 size each. So for both, it was 3 meters and 8 meters. So we need like 2 words. So to make 2 words, we need this overlapping, and then there is a so I will call it.
And we in the last installation, the one that's showing right now, we got to the point where we could also allow things to bleed through from one reflection to the other. It makes it even more fun. So creatures can kind of wander out of one side and appear in the other.
So in your lexicon,
Yep. Predict interactions that people would have with the visualization itself?
no, you take the data.
Mm-hmm.
If you look for interaction, the data, like a natural example would be genome sequencing or heat maps.
Mm-hmm.
So in heat maps, you get those colors, but they need to know where they are.
We didn't, so the experience of trying to find interactions comes from the way that we organize the visualization, right? So you see the interaction based on the semantic categories in that sunburst diagram of the words that are all related to wealth and money, because we put them all together and then you start to see that pattern. But we could organize it in a lot of different ways. We could organize it based on the letter that starts the first letter of the word, and then reveal interactions that might appear that way. You know, I don't think all the words that start with A have a particular color, but we don't know until we actually try and sort it that way. So, yeah.
Data that is not really
maybe we have 12,000 participants. So we've got a lot of data, so we might be able to extrapolate and try and guess colors that might be for words that aren't in the data set, for example, based on their semantic categorization. Finding bias in nature. I don't know. Yeah.
Let me try and put together the two presentations, because there were 2 items that really hit me during this presentation today, and also when I actually decided to put you together. I'm not crazy. I think there's some logic behind it. But like, there's 2 items that I want to bring up before we go on to the discussion. One is, okay, so we pointed out the difference between Endogenous Visualization and non-ontology's work, but then in all cases, also in this case, there's a tendency to go and look for trends, to extrapolate trends and behaviors. And following that, when you're talking about the colors and the association between colors and words, first of all, it strikes me because the immediate thing that came to me was the issue of mediation. Now you usually use rhetorical figures to convey certain meanings. So now we are adding another layer to it. And so the issue of mediation comes again. And it comes again with your work as well, because there's an issue of mediation, like the relation between the public and the data, and there's a lot of layers to them. So I'm kind of wondering, if I know that these are like two very different and very complex issues, but like if you can address some of them, like the idea of education and the idea of like the behavioral, like the extrapolating some behavioral challenges that I can sort of like make summarize things.
I think when you're writing and you get these exposures about the colors that you're that are related to the words that you're writing, I'd be really curious to see if that kind of intervention actually changes the way that people might choose to write. I don't know. We're actually in the process of sort of showing this off to people and having them give it a try. We actually have some appointments this week to talk to some poets about it. So maybe they'll just say, like, this is insane, I never would use this, it's crazy. I don't know, I'd be happy to hear that. But I'm really interested to see, like, what the response is going to be. So in my work, we're trying to, if you think about mediation, we're trying to understand a little, so from a sort of scientific point of view, we actually think of the people who are going to use these as participants in an experiment. We do like ethnographic research to understand. So in our poetry work, we went out and studied 14 poets doing poetics, like on 28 hours of recordings of people just annotating documents and trying to understand like what's the process there, to try and put in a computational support or mediation that is not going to interrupt their normal workflow in a major way and be disruptive, but maybe be assistive in some way. This one is a little bit more playful, the lexichrome. It doesn't really come from that kind of grounding, so maybe it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of it.
Yeah?
Can I start to like, yeah. I think I'm not sure like I really understand you rightly, but for us that we made the artificial nature, right, which is close to like inspired by nature, and we understand that if we have the pre-assumption that nature is data itself. I mean, nature is a system which generates data. So we try to make the system which generates patterns and data. So we focus on like what kind of data. Instead of that question, we focus on what's happening when we discover data and when kind of gives to that behavior like some kind of meaning. So that like the same data or the patterns and system can have like different layers of meanings to different people. Like for example, we like this analogy that like PhD like grandfather like kind of went to the seashore like to walk to the seashore with like his granddaughter. And then both of them enjoy the nature, and they learn like they see different patterns, then they learn different data out of the nature. And we wanted to make that like the integrated complexity. And can you add?
Yeah. There's a couple of things. The first thing that came to my head when you said mediation is so there's this thing that's really important for creating virtual reality, which is the concept of presence. So the feeling that you feel really present in the world, and it's related to illusion, but it's more than that. And one of the definitions that I really like for what presence is, because it's a controversial concept anyway, is it has to do with many different factors, and there's a lot of research being gone into it. But one definition that seems to capture a lot of it is it is the continuous illusion of non-mediation. So you're continuously accepting the illusion that what you're experiencing is not mediated. Even though it is, obviously, yeah. And even though, which is more interesting, even though you can consciously act knowing that it's mediated and do other things that are accepting it's mediated at the same time that you're accepting it.
You're present, which is really strange.
So we have to think about that in terms of how we create our world, because feeling present in the world is really important to be part of the ecosystem, part of our goal, right? Creating an illusion that makes you feel like what you're interacting with is real in a sense, even though it's not. We don't really make an attempt to make it part of the world. So there's this sort of tension of designing something that is, on the one hand, seductive enough to get you in there, and rich enough to keep you in there, while at the same time not sacrificing our
So
there's always this tension.
You need to really recognize what it is, but at the same time it should be unfamiliar. Like it should be alien. So it's like a resemblance but different something, and there's always tension to create and to build.
Which hopefully answers that question at the beginning about how we design, or at least partially answers it. There's one more thing I wanted to say, which relates to what Chris said, and especially I really appreciate the last slide where he's looking at the issues of bias and on how can I say this? So I am concerned generally about how much we are using data-driven systems in the world these days. The big data is steering the design of things in our environment that we live in our social environment, our cultural environment, in our mediated environment. Partly, my concern is that this is a lot of the insights that are generated, because they are generated from statistical results, they are inherently the results of almost like negative feedback. A little bit like in thermodynamics, right? We can predict the macro scale behavior of thermodynamic systems because we can make statistical assumptions about the elements being more or less the same. The results that come through from statistical approximations can only talk about the majority. But what I really appreciate, and this came up when we were talking before, that Chris is really interested in the outliers, the things that don't fit into the model, the things that spike off in a different way. And this is, I think, also something that is a characteristic of natural living systems. This is a characteristic of life in general, that it bucks the trend. It avoids descent into the attractor. And this is something that is kind of essential to how we're trying to develop our systems. We're trying to make something that kind of gets that really nice sweet spot that kind of doesn't fit into what the normal, that is creative.
So you don't include speciation in your model. Therefore, you don't really, you have emergent behavior, but the creatures in your system aren't evolving emergent behavior.
They
don't make their own goals.
Okay, so that's our future goal. But the slide that I skipped past is kind of working in that direction. So it's gone past it. So this one. So yes, we are trying. We do have evolution. And moreover, the evolution that we have is not just evolution of pre-existing parameters, but we model the behavior of each organism as a small program that processes its sensors and its internal state, works out the energetic cost, and ends up with side effects of behavior. These programs are a product of the genetic information, and they're subject to the evolutionary pressures of being able to survive and reproduce in the world. So each organism has a distinct program, and we've been doing this thing of compiling this down to machine code so that we can have large populations of these things running at the same time. It doesn't mean that we have speciation, because speciation means that they get to the point where they can't reproduce with each other, and we don't have the mechanism for that. But this is just a baby step. What we're trying to get to with this endogenous account is that rather than the behaviors that we write just existing because we wrote them, they emerge from simpler behaviors that we put in place. So we say, well, we want this kind of interaction. Then we say, well, how could that interaction emerge? So write the things from which it could emerge, and then other things could emerge from those same interactions as well. So that's the long-term goal.
I just want to follow up quickly on this idea of mediation. I thought it was interesting you were saying, like, you go for this idea of immersion, and the mediation is sort of transparent. You don't feel it. You're actually part of you're present there. And I actually want to do the exact opposite. I want to make sure that people know that this is mediated and that we're making these decisions and we're editing the data and we're showing only part of it. And when you zoom in, you've got context loss. So it's just interesting, it made me think like I would never want to do that. That would be, because that's like trying to fool people is what it feels like. But it makes sense in your context. But in the context of actually having somebody do like serious analytics on some data, they need to know what's being changed, or what's being removed or hidden. One of the things that came up, I took a picture of one of your slides because I really saw the interesting parallels there. Haru, you were talking about there is no predefined solution to what we do and what we see, and one becomes part of the system. And I think in terms of the way we discuss visual analytics, we actually think of it that way too, as an analytic system where the person is interacting with the data visualization. It's not as immersive, but you're still interacting, making decisions about what you're seeing, and then it's presenting back to you new pieces of information or new correlations, and it's like back and forth in sort of a loop. So it just was familiar to me, the way that you stated it. So,
At the risk of introducing to the discussion here, a lot of my clients and colleagues are working with very large data sets, extremely high dimensionality, and they're looking for something, and they don't always know what it is, and the trying to visualize that in a meaningful way is difficult. What we're trying to do is, you guys kept talking about information. There's very little information out there. There's a lot of data. And what we're doing as computer scientists is developing tools for insight, tools, and I would say called tools of thought. Things that will help us think, that will help us analyze and understand the world around us and produce insights about it based on that. So there's a wonderful book called The Visual Display of Quantitative Information.
Edward Tufte.
Yeah. And I, it's a delight. And, some of the things that I've got there's a group in England that is trying to do similar things with very crude stuff, and they're finding out relating diet and location, where someone lives, and their medical history and stuff. And say, there's a hot spot of this particular cancer in this part of Wales. Why is that? We don't know, but once you see it, then you can start treating people.
Sure, visualization as hypothesis generating, for sure.
Yeah, so what I want to know is, how can we exploit these things that you guys are doing to provide rich tools of expression that will help facilitate that kind of what-if analysis problem? You don't know what you're looking for.
I have an answer, but you can go ahead first. Yep.
Okay. Well, anecdotal. The work that we were doing in the Alisphere was specifically designed for that kind of question. We wanted the space to be used as an instrument in the sense that you go in there, you have a new way of interacting with your data using, much wider bandwidth of your perception, your action, in order that there would be scientists working in that space making discoveries by means of this space, which implies that they're working without the assumption of knowing what they're looking for, because otherwise it could be done without the aid of that kind of device. For one reason or another, almost every collaboration that we tried to create did not lead to that kind of activity. Mostly the space was being used as an outreach device, and it was extremely frustrating. And it seemed like there was a strong resistance from maybe we just had bad luck, but from the scientists that we approached to actually consider using that space as a space of discovery, which was really frustrating for us.
Do you have an idea why that worked?
Why is that? I'm a physical scientist. There's an skepticism for visualization. Every time you say I visualize something or other, it's kind of like you fool me into seeing something in the data. Great mathematician named Laplace wrote an entire book on the mechanics of the solar system, a single diagram that we figured out of this. And there's an immensely long history of tradition in math and physics in suppressing anything that relies on just looking at it. So, I mean, there's layers and layers.
Yeah.
If you visualize data, for example, you showed your thing, visualizing
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, which ended up being an average. Yeah.
A skeptical scientist would say, that's not what the molecules look like. The dynamics of those molecules,
Well, they don't look like bowls with sticks between them either.
So there's a skepticism which is quite deep, that wrong conclusions can be drawn from looking at things and seeing how they feel to you, or look to you. Right?
I think the reference earlier to Tufte is really relevant here.
Yeah.
And that's one of the warnings that he's giving, right, is that we can mislead with visualizations that are not well designed. And even if they are well designed, we can see things there that may not be true. They are not conclusive. They have to be used as a hypothesis generating tool, right? A question generating tool even. So some of the things that we make in my lab, I mean, we make a design decision before we even create it about what kinds of questions do we think this is going to be able to answer. We don't know necessarily the answers to the questions, but we know the questions. And one of the big sort of grand challenges, I think, is to be able to design systems that allow people to come up with questions and create views that are appropriate to those questions on their own without having a huge amount of design that has to go into it. We can do that now with the restricted forms of charts in Excel or the more advanced things that we have in Tableau. But we don't have the ability for most people to come up with their own kinds of ways of looking at data. I think the other interesting thing that's emerging, I think, is the breaking down of the silos within computer science, where people like me who have a graphics and HCI and design kind of background are starting to work with people who actually work in databases, knowledge representation, those kind of things, to think about how can we pre-analyze the data and try and, again, we still have to know what kinds of things are people interested in. So if they're interested in the outliers or they're interested in the trends, maybe we can shave off pieces of subsets of the data that are important and visualize those or show those. And again, the design challenge is to make it apparent that we're actually curating this and only showing what some algorithm thinks is the important thing for you to look at. And we did that last year in a project where we were looking at Twitter and trying to find tweets that might be rumors. And of course, there's 50 million tweets in our data set. We can't show 50 million tweets on the screen, so we showed the top 1,000 that were ranked by a classifier as being possibly rumors, and then other tools to allow somebody to explore that and try and figure out, by reading them and doing some research, what's a rumor and what's not a rumor. So I think that for me is part of what's coming out in the future, is the idea that we can sort of pre-curate the data. But again, there's this possibility of biasing and leading people down a garden path. So I don't know the answer to your question, but it's a really interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's sure.
Color their page to make you feel good, whether it's DS or not. So the application of these techniques is always.
I think there's a difference, though, between scientific visualization and the information visualization work that I do, in that I'm not trying to represent some existing reality in terms of its physical structure. I'm creating new kinds of ways of looking at data that's abstract and doesn't have a physical structure, but we still can show patterns that are not really there. So, for example, remember that sunburst diagram? Yeah. It's divided up into slices that are based on the categories of the language. If at the outer edge two things are next to each other, they might be part of a totally different slice, but they're next to each other, and so that might create an artificial pattern that you see that's not actually existent. They just happen to be next to each other, but they're not actually meaningfully related. So that's one of the things we were working on today, was trying to break those slices with these big lines that radiate out from the middle to try and say, no, this is a completely different category. But I think we might actually have to space them apart. So we are considering these kind of things, like are we potentially bringing up accidental relationships that aren't actually there in the data. But it's hard. I mean, we are just trying to predict, and we don't know exactly, other people might see things that we're not able to see. So there are some design sort of processes and principles that we can go on, but we can't predict everything.
To exist, I mean, there are other sciences like cognitive science, psychology, sociology that look at the same, actually are looking at the same issues, right? With different types of tools, maybe software tools, I don't know, it depends on what the discipline is. Are you incorporating them? Are you working with them? Are you integrating them in some way?
Yeah.
In your project, again, the interactions, are you drawing on other people's skill sets to develop your ecological responses and interaction? Obviously, there's biological, those are sort of primary. You don't have to have studied it in great detail to know there's a certain, it's common knowledge, some of what you use, but I'm curious if you are playing with these ideas, what's your, apart from the joy of playing with these ideas and looking at it, are you also incorporating some kind of overall intent or I mean, is there utilitarian intent behind your power to incorporate other philosophies?
We are really in depth of other experts, but because a lot of knowledge is it came from that every other disciplines, and then people kind of wrote the papers and they wrote books, and then even about the codings, about the systemic problems that everybody kind of. So many people that they kind of really solve the problems and they share those knowledges with us. So I could say that our work kind of maybe direct kind of artists who worked for the pieces, the two of us, but I think it's about really many people from our time that we are really in depth with so many anonymous researchers from biology, from physics, from all other places. And then but recently so far we hadn't much kind of opportunity to work directly with the other experts, but we had a chance to kind of to communicate and then to have the meeting, and then when we were a little bit isolated, and in terms of the domain of media arts and technology, but so couldn't see scientists directly. But this time we met in this summer that we participated in the forum with the
astronomers, material scientists,
physics scientists, and it was really, really interesting there how kind of they found their theory out of our work, and then we could kind of really share the ideas together. So that kind of we are expecting in the future that we can kind of directly kind of incorporate to work together to expand.
Yeah, biologists, the biologists that I got the chance to talk to, they get really into it. I think maybe it's sort of, they get to play a little bit. They don't have to stick to the rules. So, yeah, I mean, it's obvious that what we're trying to do is ridiculous. I mean, maybe the behavioral model of an organism is actually about 10 times more complex than that diagram, but that is still 1,000,000 times simpler than a nematode worm. It's there's no comparison there. It's sort of remarkable that something even approximating nature it can be simulated with so little.
Well, I really can declare this is a way to try to understand our nature and who we are about the life. I think it's one of the best ways that when you try to make it, then you really can get to understand. Yeah. Admire more.
It is definitely challenging to work in such an interdisciplinary area. I mean, I have some background in linguistics and some background in computer science and a PhD supervisor who is an artist, but I don't have cognitive science background, for example, psychology. So we rely on, for example, textbooks that are written for my community. So there are some great books about sort of high-level background on perception and cognitive science for information visualization, for example. But also, when I need to, I go out and seek collaborators who have that expertise. So we're working on a couple of projects now with relation to, it's interesting you said you don't label things. We're labeling lots of stuff, right? My work is about words. So we have to figure out ways to present words that remain legible, but can maybe carry information. So I want to do, for example, understand how people interpret font size as how it carries data. we have these wordles, different sizes, but nobody's actually ever tested to see like how the length of the word might affect the amount of information somebody thinks that there is in that word, or what's the value of that word. So to be able to do a study like that from a methodological point of view, I don't have the background, so we'll go out and talk to people who do study perception and collaborate with them. So that's what we're doing. Or like working with a topographer from OCAD to think about maybe we need to design new typefaces for visualization. So I've given up on trying to have all the knowledge.
It's in a similar vein. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just it's similarly. So now at York, I'm beginning to have the chance to work with. There's a Center for Vision Research, which is both Faculty of Health and Computer Science, and so through that, I'm hoping that we can really refine a lot the interactions, the spatial interactions that people can have in the space. So we're working on it.
To bring an exhibition here?
I would love to. Waiting for the invitation. Yeah.
Louis Blanche, but it might get trashed.
That's would like to host it. I'm having Ulysses, by the way, is having some kind of session on big data. I don't know if it's still running.
It was one last summer I spoke at.
For a while, but like it was a whole series of series. So like, there was the symposium, which we were.
Yeah, I spoke at one in the summer here.
So there was one in the I don't know now.
That's how Fields works.
They have series. So it's done.
It's done.
It's done.
Well, it would be great too. We just moved here in the last year, so yeah, still pulling out the feelers.
You have to be kicked out.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
No, it's for a courtesy to the Jan.